Welcome everyone to the Line-Faced Guru podcast number 7. In this episode, Kim Rinpoche, Lama Karl and Acharya Ugi from the Pemako Buddhist lineage will talk about one of the essential aspects of Dharmic practice, Bodhicitta, the aspiration to achieve Buddhahood for the liberation of all sentient beings. As simple and straightforward this aspect of bodhicitta might seem, it's one of the topics so many practitioners of Dharma struggle with. And a quick look into Dharma literature reveals that this isn't due to a lack of explanation. The books are full of explanations regarding bodhicitta. Yet, people have a hard time connecting their own experience to it, which often leads to doubt, confusion, frustration, and hesitation towards the Dharma and their practice thereof. In the following pragmatic discussion, we will address these difficulties from our own personal understanding that we've come to due to our own experiences and challenges with the aspect of bodhicitta. So, we will discuss the actual development or unraveling of bodhicitta, and that there's not really a contradiction between wanting liberation for oneself first and wanting it for all others. We will further discuss how natural bodhicitta is to us already and how important it is to connect to our own feeling of it and not just read about it. This then leads into a discussion of the two kinds of bodhicitta, relative and absolute, and how proper emptiness practice automatically leads to bodhicitta and proper bodhicitta practice automatically leads to emptiness inside, until their perfect unity is revealed as absolute bodhicitta. Enjoy. So how does it come that it's not for a lack of theoretical knowledge that people don't, or that we, when we come to the Dharma practice, don't understand bodhicitta or have a hard time understanding it because the books are full of it. So how does it come that it's such a difficult topic?
I think that's the same problem with basically anything about internal yogic, meditative, contemplative practice, that, you know, there are, million books where it's explained in some books extremely well, in some books less well. But there's tons of material about bodhicitta and about everything else in yogic practice, Dharma practice. And the challenge that might become a problem always is to have concepts and theory translated into experience. What is kind of interesting also is that sometimes people have, let's say, recognition of basic nature, recognition of Buddha nature, recognition of our wakeful nature spontaneously. So they already have that experience before they come to Dharma. And I've seen this maybe a few times during my career that these kind of people come to Dharma guides, instructors, teachers, but then the teachers don't understand it. They kind of, I suppose for various reasons, don't understand how somebody could have a recognition or experience of bodhicitta without Dharma practice. And this creates kind of a funny situation between the person who's had a spontaneous experience and then a representative of some tradition or lineage. But I think it's the same problem with everything, that, you know, books are full of theoretical information and knowledge, but then, you know, how to transform, how to have the actual experience. I think that's the issue. And that's, of course, you know, obvious thing that, you know, whatever we practice should enable us to have that experience and those experiences. To me, it's like a completely obvious point, but unfortunately, it isn't. It always isn't. People get stuck with ink and paper. theory is there just to support everything else, to give structure to internal experience, to meditation practice, and that's it. But I've seen Buddhist scholars of different vehicles, Mahayana and Vajrayana, make the observation that unfortunately it is the scholarly aspect of Dharma, the theoretical aspect of Dharma that has way too much emphasis in the world, when it should be that the theory is there just to give structure for the internal practice. So that's the way it should be, that not that you're reading books let's say that if you practice the Dharma for 2 hours a day, so not that you read books for an hour and a half and practice for 30 minutes, but the other way around. You read for 10 minutes and then sit on the cushion and meditate or chant or whatever you practice for the rest of the time. So that's the way how it should be. And that's, in my view, it's kind of an obvious point, but to my surprise, it isn't obvious for a lot of people. Yoga, Dharma is not an academic. It can be made into an academic study and subject of academic study. But obviously, if we look at the beginnings of yogic tradition, Buddhist tradition, it's obviously about experiences. It's obviously about changes that happen in our mind and in our psyche that changes the way how we see the world and view the world. So there it is, but somehow things get confusing and the whole thing gets upside down. Yeah.
Not only does it get confusing with if one is first presented with only theory, but it also seems so far away. There's this distance between, like in my own experience, quite often I find that if I read, or perhaps more earlier in my meditation career, I would approach these books and I couldn't really relate it to any of my own experiences, even though in retrospect I've realized that that's what it is. But that's like that has continued. That has been something I've experienced several times. But it's just that it's difficult to approach it from somebody else's conceptual viewpoint, because everybody talks and everybody writes from their own conceptual understanding, and we use different languages like that, and sometimes it's quite difficult to relate. So that in the case of bodhicitta, even just using the word bodhicitta, it just makes it very foreign, exotic, while the experience of it is something that I think everybody, regardless of, not perhaps everybody, but the majority of people on this earth has experienced the meaning of that at one, even just for a short glimpse. And I think the most important part then is to make people understand that, make that connection so that they can then work on cultivating it from there on.
Yeah.
But I think that's the difficult part always for people and for our samsaric mind. We hear about something like bodhicitta or compassion, and we immediately think we don't have it, or it's something that we have to produce, or we have to make something for it to happen. We never really assume that we already have it, that it's already complete inside of us. And I think that's what I struggled the most with, was that discrepancy in my mind of, on one hand, it says it's your basic nature. Compassion is at the heart of your mind. And then my distorted perception of it, of seeing nothing of it. Like, I'm judging people. I feel disconnected from people. I don't feel like that. And if I'm really honest with myself, I sit down to practice to get rid of that shit in my head, which makes me feel miserable.
What was really useful to me when I started practicing back in the day, I started with Zen Buddhism. So one like the really foundational thing in Zen Buddhism is the 4 basic bodhisattva vows, which is universal to Mahayana, but it's emphasized quite a bit. And I remember the first couple of months when I did my practice, we were always reciting the 4 vows with other recitations in practice sessions. And for the first couple of months, I didn't read those vows because I realized that it had a word vow there. So, vow is something that is, if you vow something, it's a deep commitment. But then, I gave myself a little time to contemplate the meaning of those bodhisattva vows. And I was reading some books about Zen Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism in general to help me understand, what was meant by those vows. Why there were these bodhisattva practices, and why was it there? And I gave myself a little time with it until one day it kind of just clicked. It made perfect sense that, I should also mention that up to that point, I had lived a very colorful and also insecure life since childhood. So I had lots of experiences and traumas, stressful experiences that added to my myself being emotionally unstable and insecure as a person and all that. So, when I came to Dharma, I would say that, I was quite ready for the medicine, quite ready for the practice, and also ready to understand why practicing to attain, practicing to stabilize the basic state, to attain Buddhahood for all beings, why it was so important. So it kind of just clicked very quickly. But so again, like I always say that, we really need to acknowledge as practitioners that we suffer, that we are confused, that we are really confused about our own existence. And then only we start having a need for Dharma practice. Because if we don't first acknowledge that, why do you practice? And there's always people like that in every Sangha, also in our Sangha. They kind of struggle with, why am I doing Dharma practice? Why am I doing these mantras and whatever practices? Because they haven't perfectly discovered that. They have discovered some that, okay, I'm here because, I acknowledge partially that I suffer. But, it has to be like a comprehensive understanding about suffering, and then we can practice. And then further, sometimes I see it in our Sangha that people struggle in the beginning with bodhicitta, with compassion. Bodhicitta can be viewed from different perspectives, so we can give different meanings to it. But from the perspective of practice, it means that we cultivate compassion towards others, and in this way discover our basic state. But sometimes I see practitioners in our Sangha struggle with compassion, because they are still working with, in our system we speak of these 13 bhumis, 13 levels or stages of practice. And the first 6 stages, the 6 bhumis, they are directly relate or correlate to Hinayana. So, this is why I sometimes, when people might be a bit confused or stressed that, well, I don't feel that compassion, I say that, calm down, just do your practice. And, when you advance in awakening experiences from 1st to 6th, and, as you keep practicing every day, you kind of just grow into it naturally. So it is not, in my view, it's not a necessary requirement from the beginning, but an advice that I always give is that think about it. We have 8 billion human beings on this planet, and we have animals, and, according to yogic theory, Buddhist theory, there is also like non-physical worlds where there are countless beings in many different forms. But just, whether you believe in non-physical worlds or not, if you just look at the physical world, think about it. Everybody else has the same problem, and everybody else suffers of the same problem, that of mind that, how should I say, is stuck with the thought of I or me. So with that simple contemplation, your heart starts opening up, your original heart starts opening up, your basic nature starts opening up, and that's compassion. You feel the suffering of others. And that's actually a really good meditation practice, a truly Mahayana meditation where you just sit down and be present to the suffering, to the pain and confusion of others. And you keep in contact with that pain and confusion. So that was my long and kind of lengthy and rambling statement about, how I came in contact with Mahayana practice and compassion, bodhicitta, and that it was preceded by deep existential confusion, anguish, really, existential anguish. And, how, to me, when I found bodhicitta, it was, after that initial contemplation of a couple of months, it just felt like it made perfect sense. And it has been like a compass of compassion since, for many years now. We can speak of bodhicitta from 2 different perspectives, absolute bodhicitta and then relative bodhicitta. So if we look at it from the point of view of practice, we have confusion, existential confusion, because of thinking and feeling and perceiving through the sense of self. So that's exactly what it is, compass. Compassion is compass.
Yeah, with the different vehicles over the years, and based on my own experience, I've kind of come to a view that I haven't seen. Probably there are people with the same view, but I haven't seen it being spoken of. So you have Hinayana, Mahayana. Let's forget about Vajrayana. It can be a part of Mahayana. It is a part of Mahayana. You have Hinayana and Mahayana. And in my mind, I separate that from the outer structures here, like the different schools. So in my viewpoint, you can have, for example, Theravada practitioners who are actually have a Mahayana perspective on the world, and you can have Mahayana practitioners in form and name, but they don't have the Mahayana. So they're much more psychological states than actual physical structures in the world, the way I see it. And it's you also mentioned that, you mentioned this, that we have people in our own Sangha who struggle with their practice, and also with the motivation to practice, to actually feel the motivation to practice for all sentient beings. And I think it's inevitable that we start. It's not just fine to be there, but it's inevitable that we start out that way, searching, because we start out with our own problems usually. I guess there are people who can feel this from beginning, the motivation, but for most people, we start out with our own situation, and then we have to, through whatever life circumstances that lead us to the recognition that we are actually suffering, and also that it is possible to do something about it. We start then the process that can lead to that recognition that, oh yeah, it actually applies to everyone. Opening the Mahayana structure in the mind, not the Mahayana structure in wearing whatever color of the robe
that's a really, really important point. Bodhicitta needs to be genuine.
Absolutely felt
that sums it up.
And also one point is that you mentioned it's a compass, and that has been my experience as well. But it's also important to note that once you become a bodhisattva, a Mahayana practitioner, it's not, in my experience, it's not like then you always have access to this bodhicitta motivation. Sometimes, and like for long periods of time, it might be lost on the surface, and then, but it's still kind of down there, and it comes up, and it comes up, and it comes up. And my experience is that it has come up when I have needed it the most. So when I get properly confused, suddenly it comes up, and it just reorients reorients the practice and the life situation again. So it stakes out, it points out the course again and again and again. So this is like the relative perspective of that it's not something that you, once you attain it, it's final. Of course, in the end, when absolute bodhicitta opens up completely, then you're done, finished. But before that, it's not something you necessarily can pride yourself with every day.
I remember something related to what you said, Karl. I remember that I practiced Zen Buddhism for 4 years. 4 years. And I remember that, I took the Bodhisattva vows in like it's like a lay ordination ceremony. I took refuge and Bodhisattva vows. And because I felt that they were so important, is why it kind of struck a bell for me, or struck a nerve. It was very meaningful to me, Bodhisattva vows, but I didn't, because there is some discussion about energetics in I practiced Rinzai, Japanese Rinzai Zen. There is some discussion about energetics, about pranic energy in Rinzai, but it's not a thorough explanation about energetics. So it was much later, when I had already practiced Tantra for some time when I really, discovered and noticed that, when I cultivate, when I express this more bodhicitta motivation by reciting the vows, or just by thinking about the motivation, there is something very strong happening in my energy body, in my aura, in my energy body. So I kind of just one day cultivated bodhicitta and noticed that, oh, heck, I never noticed that before, right? And what happens is that it's very simple, really. It's stupidly simple. What is that? Our problem is that we are self-centered. Me, I. Angry, anxious, pissed off, jealous, greedy, and so on. Lack of self-esteem, and so on. It's like an endless list of self-centeredness, crystallizing into this I thought, I, me, right? And what bodhicitta does when we generate compassion is that it's the opposite energetic movement, act happens in the energy body. So self-centeredness, the energy condenses here and how should I say, enforces the thought of I, but bodhicitta does the exact opposite. It opens our mind, opens our heart, and establishes our basic state, which is selfless. So it's that simple. But think about, well, if somebody gets pissed off about this, I'm sorry, but this is just a fact that, if you practice the Dharma, you practice Vipassana, Buddhist meditation, you do inquiry you deconstruct the sense of self without bodhicitta. Without bodhicitta, there is no outgoing motion. There is no opening up of the energy body. You're just, there is this self-centeredness, and you start deconstructing that with analytical meditation, Vipassana, right? So because that outgoing motion is not there, you only access the energy body partially. And this is the defining difference between Hinayana and Mahayana. In Mahayana, compassion, bodhicitta, is cultivated so that there is that outgoing motion and that we can access the whole energy body, the whole aura, all chakras and nadis, and then use that for analytical meditation. It's that simple. I wonder, Mahayana developed out of the basic small vehicle of Buddhism back in the day, maybe like a few hundred years or something after Shakyamuni Buddha's time. And it must have been like one of those eureka moments when somebody realized that, heck, when I cultivate compassion, there's something amazing happening in my energy body, right? Up until that point, they had just been deconstructing the self-illusion partially. But suddenly there was much more material for practice.
I also think that because we have that self-centeredness and it's our default mode for such a long time, we can only start there often until we have that glimpse of absolute bodhicitta, of that outgoing experience. But I think what helped me to understand it was seeing it. Bodhicitta is seeing that you have a solution, and it's not the solution for yourself, but for everyone. But for that to happen, to genuinely feel that, you have to know for yourself first that it works. You don't try to guide someone through the forest, through a path. You don't know if it really leads to the end of the forest. So So it's kind of natural that we back off that concept of bodhicitta if we don't feel it, that it does so much for us yet. So we first have to get a liberating experience of the Dharma, some kind of certainty on our own mind, on our own problems, to see, wow, this really works. Then it comes from faith to certainty to personal experience. And then I think it's really easy to develop that bodhicitta motivation, because you know that there is a solution to that from your own experience.
Definitely. Mahayana needs to be built on Hinayana. You could say that advanced practice needs to be built on foundational practice, foundational insights. Definitely.
In my case, I hadn't really, I don't think I had started proper practice when I first encountered bodhicitta. So actually the first time I encountered the word was at university that was a proper academic setting of East Asian religion. I took a course to build into my philosophy studies. And the presentation there was that the Mahayana path was presented as practitioners, bodhisattvas, who take this vow to not attain full enlightenment before everybody else is freed. And I remember already back then, it was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how do you relate this to the actual world? And I didn't have any experience at that time, or I did have very little experience, but it just didn't seem to make sense to me. But so I've talked about, of course, before, and it's something that comes up regularly with various mind-altering substances like psychedelics. And I think that was the first time that the first proper trip, I had this experience of, it's called ego death in psychedelic terms. And it's this experience of having to go through the death process, and then it's not so clear to me actually what exactly. Still, it's not so clear to me. I cannot bring the experience that much back in terms of like all the hallucinations or whatever I experienced. But one thing was that this connection, this deep connection to all beings, that stayed with me for a few hours afterwards, and it also flipped completely over to this complete isolation once the drug wore off. But that was what happened to me then, was that before that, I had been completely self-absorbed. Like, I remember, like, a friend of mine and I were drinking quite heavily at the time, and we were just going to the stores and we were stealing all the beer. Like, we would just take whatever we needed because it was ours to take. All kinds of rationalization processes of these big capitalist stores feeding off of, the really rugrat mentality. But what happened after that was that I couldn't steal anymore. Like, I just couldn't. There was this. My conscience started. I got into touch with my conscience because of this experience of whatever I do to other people is basically like I'm doing it to myself. Like on a metaphorical level, that there is no, like, if you hurt other people in any other way, it's as if you would start beating yourself in the face. And it came back also prior to finding Buddhism, this intense feeling. I remember after finishing my philosophy students, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that I had enough of this intellectual chess game that is Western academic philosophy. So I wanted to do something else. And there was also one time I was sitting with a friend, and suddenly it just burst. Like it felt like my heart opened up. And again, speaking metaphorically, there was as if a voice just said, you know what you have to do, and that is to help other beings. So again, I had no idea after that, like, how the fuck do I go about helping other beings? You know, I was as confused. I was really confused. And what happened was that I started physical therapy school, which didn't go well. But anyways, it's it came prior to Buddhism. It was this recognition of this, that we're in the same boat, and you can either focus on yourself or you can help out with the situation here.
I can actually remember, as you were talking about that, I remember a clear sense of, you know, that essential point of trying to help and support others. I remember it from childhood and through the youth. But, you know, I didn't know, you know, I was a student of music when I was a teenager. And during those days, I remember that I was searching for the truth from music, from musical expression, from composing, from playing instruments and stuff. But then eventually I realized that, heck, I don't think I will find it from scales and chords and melodies and harmonies. So that's how the detour into Dharma for the next 20 years happened.
And I think that one point that I forgot to mention was that what happens with this attitude, once, maybe not so much consciously, like you can recognize it from beginning, but this is speaking from now and perhaps looking back, is that whatever suffering it is that you experience after this realization, or together with this bodhicitta motivation, it becomes a way of learning how to help other beings. Because if you don't have any understanding of what suffering means in practice, then there is no way of relating to other beings. So, like, whatever is thrown at you then becomes this. It's like the school of learning how to relate and how to actually help other beings, and it's a completely different perspective on life and on these hardships. That it makes it also easier to deal with one's own stuff. Which I believe is why also a part of why this bodhicitta motivation to actually practice for the benefit of all beings is so radical, because it's absolutely radical from the perspective of the ego, the I.
Right. Yeah.
There are people who, many people in our world, from the in a samsaric state, they try to help others, give all their energy into helping others, but they don't understand suffering, not their own one, and not the suffering from people they help or try to help. So it's noble in a sense, but misguided in another sense, because without understanding of suffering you don't really have anything to offer solutions.
And that's the genius of, you know, I don't think that Buddhism to me is Buddha Dharma. It's like a method or a methodology to understand ourselves. To me, Buddhism is not a religion, right? But a genius of this method is that it has two fundamental elements. There's wisdom and there is compassion. And these two are, we can investigate and practice wisdom and compassion as two separate things, and there are different practices for both, but eventually they unite. They are understood that it's the same nature of mind that is both wise as well as compassionate. But when it comes to practice, it's when you said that thing about you said something about trying to help but still suffering oneself. So in Buddhism, these two, wisdom and compassion, always are together, because you can't have the other one. You can't, our basic nature is what it is. You can't take half of it out, right? So that's one thing. But another thing is that wisdom and compassion as practices, as compassion practice that opens us up, and wisdom practice that, vipassana meditation, analytical meditation, where you start seeing in a sober, clear way. And you investigate with a sober mind, with clear seeing, you investigate into these self-habits, self-formulations, self-based tendencies that happen in your mind, in your emotions. And that insight, when that seeing of clarity penetrates through our blind spots, our spots of blindness, there is further clarity, expansion of clarity becoming fuller, but also there is, after these moments of insight, compassion feels different. So it's always two. There would be no sense of, if we focused. Well, it's kind of, this is perhaps a bit difficult to say, but Buddha Dharma, Buddhism as a yogic method focuses on removing our self-based ignorance. So that's definitely like a heavy on the wisdom end. That's a wisdom project, right? But we can't go reach the end of that wisdom project without compassion, which is ties up to the previous point of Mahayana, Hinayana discussion. But there are sanghas who kind of and methods that emphasize compassion. But it's like a silly endeavor, if you understand that our basic nature itself, it has not only one flavor, not only one function, not only one characteristic, but several of them. So it doesn't make sense, when we have this theory, this understanding, not to even mention experience of our basic nature, that some method emphasizes compassion or love over wisdom. They always need to be 50-50. And eventually, when the ultimate realization comes, they are both at the same time. The other is not even 1% more or less.
Yeah, one way that I view Christianity is that it has a heavy focus on compassion and love for your, I don't know how to say in English, but love for your next, like your neighbor, your neighbor. Yeah. But I think that it's evident there also what happens when then wisdom is not in place. Because I guess one way to view the whole Jesus story of the taking on the suffering of all getting crucified, regardless of whether it happened or not in historical, like as a fact, there's this bodhicitta motivation there that you're actually practicing for the to relieve the world suffering
and sin. Yeah, that's exactly so. Yeah. That's exactly so.
And it's even in the one line from Christianity, this whole paradox of help yourself to help others, which is Buddha Dharma. This, you relieve your suffering and then you can relieve the suffering from others. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If you have complete hatred toward yourself, you cannot really help others. Yeah. So this is in there. It's also in there.
And this is very much, I think, relevant today in a society where we see all these kind of surface virtue that really seems to be based on anger and hate more than actual appreciation and gratitude and love for what we have, which is this opportunity to do good.
Yeah, it gets completely distorted if you take out that aspect of compassion. It can become into the most violent ideology.
Yeah, exactly, and that you see that in Christianity. That it has, and it has happened in Buddhism. It has happened in all of these religions. That if it turns sour, it turns incredibly sour, because it's based on good intentions, and that's the most dangerous path there is. Like with this idiot compassion or fool's compassion in Buddhist terms. Yeah, but you mentioned this paradox of helping others through helping yourself, and I think that's not clear to that many people how that actually works. But one way I've come to see it is that, we don't have that much as individual human beings. We don't have that much control over the world. Like there's billions of other human beings, and endless other beings, and we don't actually have that much control over the life circumstance or like the totality of existence, but we can do something about ourselves. And what the way I see it is that when you the first of the 4 vows, bodhisattva vows, I vow to liberate all sentient beings. So that's in one sense, looks completely impossible on a outer level to liberate all beings. And but what we can do, and what I have come to see, is that you can liberate all beings from yourself, from your tyranny, from your anger, from all of these emotions that directly affect not only the immediate surroundings, but it has rippling effects.
In the basic Mahayana theory, there are the 6 classes of beings, different kinds of beings, different kinds of existences, right? Different kinds of emotional states and like identification with certain kinds of mind stage that creates these 6 classes of beings. But then outside and inside of it, simultaneously, outside and inside of the 6 realms are the Buddhas. So everybody else is inside the wheel in samsaric realms, but only Buddhas are outside of it and inside at the same time. So just something that you said, Karl, led me to say this because we started discussing how bodhicitta can seem so distant and far and so advanced and scary to people. If you read some classics and it starts with, even the first page where where the author has written like these venerations to all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who, are 100,000,000 Bodhisattvas in different realms. And, it's so scary on the first page that you might not even make on page 3 where Bodhicitta is mentioned. But it was beautifully said what you said, Karl, about liberating all beings in our own mind stream. Because that means that when we do attain Buddhahood, when we become fully liberated of all delusional mind functioning, it means that it's not like I said, we are no longer inside that washing machine of samsaric realms. We are in it, but also outside of it at the same time. So I've spent a lot of time contemplating this, that, a lot of Buddhism, a lot of stuff from the Buddhist tradition seems very scary. Not to even mention Christian ones, because they only think that only Jesus is the Son of God, which is completely misleading idea entirely. But, also Buddhist tradition with all the prestige and, scary prestige, bad kind of prestige, it makes us think that Buddhas are these completely, sort of like aliens on earth, which is one sense is true, because somebody whose mind has no stains and has no blind spot, has no dark holes, that is very rare in this world, in this samsaric world. But at the same time, it doesn't all that mysticality and all that woo-woo and all the bad kind of prestige that is attached to Buddhahood and full enlightenment. It's completely misleading. So I liked what you said, that in a really plain and kind of secular explanation of bodhicitta, that I just wanted to add that when full enlightenment is reached, we simply are and remain sober. We are and remain, we keep having this heart of kindness, heart of love and compassion, while being sober and clear and grounded. And that's it. That's all.
I think a lot of this misunderstanding from these old texts, it's not a problem with the old texts. It's a problem with because as modern Westerns, we are in this weird place where, while we still teach our children through stories, we as adults somehow have this blanket over our minds that just reject stories as a carrier for morals, for insight. So when all these stories are actually, they're not intellectual in any way, or at least the ideal story are not meant to be understood, but they're actually transmitters of bodhicitta, transmitters of the nature of mind on a much on a subconscious level, but not in the sense of unconscious. But it happens not on the intellectual, rational level, this transmission, but it can be blocked by it, and I think that's what we're seeing. So that we have these fantastic stories of Guru Rinpoche's life story, which I believe also kind of it varies from account to account, and people just get hung up on that, and it's just fuck that, it's not true. This is just fantasy, just completely disregarding the fact that this is meant to speak to the heart, to speak metaphorically, and not to the rational mind. So that's why I guess we have to kind of get it down to earth in this time that we're in. we need to be able to convey it in a secular way as well, without taking the I wouldn't say magic, but without taking the joy out of it.
Yeah.
The beauty out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That well describes my recent thoughts about Vajrayana Buddhism in the West, and especially, our method, Pemako Buddhism, because it's of a different culture, it's a different time, and it is important to speak to the heart. But I think that we can in a very simple, modern, casual way, we can still speak to the heart. So we don't need mystical elements to speak to the heart, or fairy tales, and I don't think we need that. So I'm all for like a simple Vajrayana.
Yeah. We don't need it, or it's counteractive. Is that the right word? Like it's counterproductive, perhaps, in our culture to present religious stories. But nevertheless, we have movies and we have fictional literature, and they can all convey these things, and they quite often convey the very same truths that Buddhism conveys or tries to convey. It's quite often the same stories that are repeated for a reason.
So Kim, you mentioned before that bodhicitta has two aspects, or two ways to look at it, two perspectives: absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. I think we've talked a lot about relative bodhicitta now, and really get into touch with the feeling of bodhicitta, and to have that motivation towards beings, which is all on the relative level, on the relative plane of our experience. How do you bridge that personally from your experience and teaching experience with absolute bodhicitta? What does that mean to you, and how do you bring it together?
Well, the way how I see that compassion that you generate through your months and years of practice, sometimes decades of practice, is that we mature. We mature spiritually, we mature as beings from being stuck with these self-based habits to being mature and not being stuck with them, and not being self-centered, but being open. You could say poetically, having an open heart and having a kind heart, and just being able to be present, whoever you meet and whatever things you meet in life, also challenges. So there is definitely like a spiritual maturation that comes with feeling compassion. And we started by discussing the challenge that bodhicitta is not a ink and paper thing. It's a lived experience. It's a lived, you could say it's a sensation, you could say it's an maybe you could say that it's an energy, you could say that perhaps you could say that it's an emotion, though it's not like an emotional states, like it's not a emotional states that it's an emotional state that opens you up and keeps you open. So when we generate bodhicitta, when we cultivate compassion, we keep opening up, and then we keep contracting because our tendencies do that, but we keep opening up. We keep opening up as many times as it's needed. and it's needed many times. But the foundation of this is genuinely feeling it, not thinking about it, feeling it in our being, feeling compassion. And like I said before, there are prerequisites for that. Acknowledging our suffering. And then, we need to have awakening experiences. We need to get our bhumis open. We need to have these shifts in our mind, meaning in our energetic body, in our energy centers and energy channels. We need to have those so that we can come up with this, like I often say, phrase it in English, genuine care and concern for others. So it's not like a sticker on a surface, but really inside the surface. We become this compassion. We become this bodhicitta. Chitta is a Sanskrit word that doesn't only mean mind and doesn't only mean heart. It means both. Because in Asia, they don't separate kind of thoughts and emotions. It's just one, it's like a mind-heart or heart-mind, what chitta means. And bodhi means awakening or enlightenment. So this is why I often translate bodhicitta as heart-mind of enlightenment or heart-mind of awakening. And that's kind of interesting thing. Bodhicitta is heart-mind, meaning condition or state or expression of enlightenment. Bing. So it's not only something that, okay, now I'm using, this is a compassion and I'm using it in my practice to then accomplish something else. Well, in a sense, it's true. We generate compassion, we use it as a practice to then discover our basic state. But it's not like some object or something you use to get somewhere. It's not like that. Bodhicitta is the heart mind of enlightenment. So when we cultivate bodhicitta and our energy body opens, that's where the heart mind of enlightenment, in other words, our Buddha nature, is recognized. And what is recognized is what Buddha nature is. That's the genius of the whole idea of compassion, and that's how it works. It isn't complex at all. But unfortunately, you can't find, really clear explanation of what bodhicitta is that often. But that's just how it is. And when it comes to, bodhicitta is you can use it as a synonym for Buddha nature, for enlightened nature of mind. You can use it as a synonym. So I was referring to the basic characteristics of the nature of mind, our Buddha nature earlier. And, the way how I teach it is that I teach three basic characteristics. And the first one is clarity or soberness, self-cognizance of the basic nature itself. It knows itself. It has a knowing quality. That's number one. The second one is aliveness, liveliness. You could say kindness, love, compassion. So there is, the first one is, it's like a clarity of a jewel, clarity of a diamond, just the pure, flawless clarity of it. That's the soberness, that's the clarity of our mind. Things are so clear, right? And the second characteristic means that aliveness, joyfulness, love, compassion, kindness, it means that there is an energetic quality to it. There is a quality of aliveness to it. Just like, if we look at, I'm looking at a big forest from my window, I can see trees, and it's a clear energy, but that clear energy is also alive, very alive, loaded with aliveness. And the third basic characteristic is groundedness, settledness. So, but the second is is aliveness, is love, compassion. So when I cultivate compassion, rationally thinking, it should lead to recognition of the basic state. And that's exactly how it is. Through that second basic characteristics, we can recognize. But of course, a prerequisite for that to happen is us to feel the practices. Not only, if we have if I'm reading a recitation book here, reading prayers from the book. I have a big book here, and it's full of print of prayers. It's not enough to just read the words. We need to feel the meaning. We need to go from external to internal and feel. And through feeling, energetic sensation, we can go to secret, which is the basic state. But it is so common, unfortunately, that teachers don't know this. And when teachers don't know this, also students don't know this, that they're supposed to notice and recognize what they are feeling. It's like a really stupid stumbling block all over the Dharma. People read these prayers that short or long and repeat them again and again and again, and they just keep repeating them without ever realizing that they carry immense blessings and energy. They just habitually bypass the blessings. They don't know that. They don't notice that there is immense blessings in the air, whether you are reciting those prayers alone or if there is 1,000 people with you practicing on a big event or something. But they just focus on paper and ink. It's like the bar is so goddamn low that it's shameful, man. When people, even teachers, big names, they don't know to point out that there is those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the air, filling the whole venue. It's nuts, man. It's ridiculous. So this is something that, I make sure that my students understand that always, even if it's you say Namo Guru Rinpoche 3 times, feel it for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. If you only do half a minute practice, right? And you say mantra for 3 times, then feel it for a moment. Or if it's a longer practice session or whatever it is, or if it's basic prayers, I always tell my students to feel the blessings, because that's only when we practice Tantra. But this energetic element is there in all. It's there in Hinayana. I've seen it, I've felt it, and I've also witnessed how they don't feel it, recognize it. I've seen the same thing in Zen. I've seen the same thing in so many different places. Also in Sutric Buddhism, in non-tantric Buddhism. It's there, but systematically it's not pointed out and it's not practiced correctly. If that's my opinion.
Yeah, you were speaking about how bodhicitta was you cultivate it on the one hand, but then you come to the realization that it is a basic structure, a basic quality of the mind. So I just think that is an important point to also tie to. For example, perhaps many who are listening to this have had the experience of the first awakening, And it's the same basic structure there, that you, on the one hand, you have to investigate the I knot. On the other hand, once that knot releases, it's quite evident that it wasn't there in the sense that you thought it was, hence the shift in perspective. And it's the same, I believe, with bodhicitta, that on the one hand, you absolutely need to cultivate it and feel these blessings, as you say. On the one hand, once it opens up, it's just there, and you don't have to do anything about it, because it is you, and it is the basic energetic quality of life. This connectedness, openness, friendliness, compassion.
Definitely. Something that I was reminded, something that I was thinking yesterday, recently, and actually throughout my life, I've been involved with martial arts. And I've gone back to martial arts, both internal and external martial arts, during the recent months. And there are big differences in pedagogy in martial arts, right? But in one of the systems I've recently studied, it says that, when you learn something basic, then you don't need to keep working on that basic. You can start working on something more advanced. And this is a really interesting point, because I've been kind of contemplating this. And it's my daughter, she started school like a month ago. And, they are learning to write letters. Well, she already knew how to write, but as we all know, when we are children and go to school, we start writing letters. So you have a shaking hand, and you don't have the coordination of the hand and the pen, and then you write the letter A, right? And then you do the next repetition of A, and the next one. So you have a whole page full of A in block letters, right? But then at some point, maybe after a couple of months, then you can write perfectly nice A, and you've learned it. And you've learned the rest of the letters. You've learned the basics. And then you can move on in your language studies to something more advanced. But this exactly rarely happens in Dharma. People keep learning the block letters. Keep A. Can I write it? No, I just have to keep writing it very mindfully. A, B. It's so what I'm trying to say, the point that I'm trying to make is that if we are talking about authentic Dharma, it is a process. And process means that, it's an arc of, like a circle of learning, or arc of learning. So you advance on the way. So if you learn something basic, like I was saying in internal martial art, that when you have done some basic practice for some time, and then you learn it, you master it, then you don't need to repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again. You can forget it, because it's in your pocket now. You have mastered that bit. So you move on to the next thing in the process. Of course, it needs plenty of glimpses of our wakeful nature, and we need like a whole bunch or a bundle of awakening experiences, cessations of mind, to become fully enlightened. So it's a I wouldn't want to say enormous task, because enormous sounds distant and too big, but it is a task of its own. But my view is that just like, we have one or two doctors in our Sangha, and they study a lot to become doctors. But I wouldn't say that finishing our purification practice or becoming fully enlightened is it even that demanding than to become a doctor? So it is a process that has a beginning, middle, and end. And that's how it should be. If a method is valid, it works, and it produces. It gives results. So, like I often say, that this happens in all other forms of education, forms and different fields of education. People start their studies and learn and come to end of their studies, and then they graduate as doctors or gardeners or whatever. But this doesn't happen in Dharma. But this needs to change because it's ridiculous, right? So it's good to discuss, what absolute bodhicitta is, which is our nature of mind. It is the heart mind of enlightenment that is sober, clear, radiating with love and blessings. We realize that we are the source of blessings. It's not the tantric guru or it's not the lineage gurus. We are the Buddhas. We are the mahasiddhas. We are the fully enlightened beings that radiate blessings and are the source of blessings. We radiate love, pure love. This is important to understand. And I think that that's the end stop. Beginning, middle, and end. That's the end stop. When we live in that experience, when we have fully discovered that we are Buddhas, we are fully enlightened beings. We have removed all those shackles and confusions that have made us small and contracted. So contraction doesn't happen anymore. And no, we need to keep stretching open. It is something that is perfectly natural, this natural state, right? And also no need to keep cultivating compassion, because that is bodhicitta, the heart mind of enlightenment. And when you've realized it, when you've stabilized it, when you've removed all the shackles, then you can focus on doing other stuff or not do anything. No need for practice, no need for, like they say, no more learning.
Just one important point on that is that also it seems that, everything then becomes integrated into this, like all parts of the personality then become natural expressions, so that the very ordinary human emotions and thoughts and all of this will then be an expression of bodhicitta, so that it doesn't come in just one form. It doesn't come in this stroking on but it can be a smack as well, from a point of clarity and real compassion.
Yeah. That is an excellent point, but it's also a tricky point, because there is so much abuse, so much, how should I say, like a mistreatment in all religions and traditions, on the excuse that, well, this is enlightened behavior. So it's a very, very difficult to it's a broad topic, let's put it like that, but that's how it is, just like some things can be met with peace. Some things in life cannot be met with peace. So sometimes you do need to raise hell. And that's just how it is. That's how it is. That's the nature of things. And of course, when we're talking about nature of mind, it cannot take the stand of always remaining peaceful and it cannot be like that. Wisdom and compassion. Wisdom means discernment. Manjushri means discernment. So if it was only love and compassion, then it would be like this all the time. But just like Guru Rinpoche was mentioned, and there are many other great Mahasiddhas in the history, fully enlightened men and women who have been extremely wrathful and have expressed points of criticism about society and about all kinds of things. So that's exactly how life remains. But not to be caught up in samsara. Like I said, that Buddhas are both in but also out of it at the same time.
To come back for a moment to absolute bodhicitta, what I wanted to add there, and I really liked about your way of explaining it, Kim, that this energetic aspect of us, it's outflowing, it's radiating. And sometimes you read that, if you practice emptiness meditation, only focusing on the emptiness aspect of everything, without the compassion aspect, you get stuck. And we know that you get stuck on the spiritual stages. At one point, there is just, you cannot go beyond your own personal mind in mind purification, just your personal accumulations and everything. And I think this explains it pretty well, that this bodhicitta, this energetic aspect, it's expression. And if you only try to purify your mind for your own sake, you try to purify impressions. Yeah. It's all coming in. And you are in this situation of, I'm freeing myself from all impulses that come to me. And then I'm fine. And this quality, which is at the same time radiating, expressing itself, that's the energetic aspect. And if you only focus on purify impressions, you don't touch that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like freeing yourself from the world and then forgetting that you have to free the world of yourself as well.
I mean, if you only recognize the clarity, the knowing aspect, the empty aspect of your mind, that is recognition of the nature of mind, but it can be one-sided if you fixate on that, then.
Yeah. And because of that, you will never finish the process. There is something that came to my mind. I have a couple of acquaintances who are practitioners of both Hinayana and Mahayana, but perhaps a bit more on the Hinayana side. And well, I've discussed this with a bunch of people throughout the years that, I just want to clarify one really important point, because if you rely on ink and paper completely, and if you start reading the descriptions of Hinayana adepts and Hinayana masters, and then compare those to adepts and masters from Mahayana and Vajrayana, it looks like it's the same. And this is always the stumbling block with practice that is non-tantric, because when there's no element of transmission, it kind of removes a way to clarify that point, right? But what I have sometimes seen is that Hinayana practitioners, they say that, well, what is said about Buddhahood and Mahasiddhahood, full enlightenment, sounds exactly the same or pretty much the same as what is said about arhats of Hinayana, those who fully realize the Hinayana vehicle, small vehicle. But again, this is from people who completely or mostly rely on ink and paper alone. And I've seen this conclusion being made so many times that kind of hurts my head a little bit, But it is not even nearly the same, not even nearly. And so, in case if you know somebody who suffers of this predicament, I just suggest the following. Chant Namo Guru Rinpoche for a day. Practice Guru Yoga with Guru Rinpoche, Shakyamuni Buddha, Milarepa, Jesus Christ, Krishna, any great spiritual figure, any great spiritual master. And you will probably realize that Hinayana and Mahayana are very different vehicles, very different endpoints. So that is I wish to suggest this in a spirit of friendliness and kindness, while being critical, while exercising my own discernment, and based on my observations that those two things are so far apart from each other that there's no debate on that point, not for me at least. With all respect.
Yeah, so I think that what people don't understand there is that so if you recognize the nature of the finger, then what you come to is the same nature as you would the whole hand, the whole body, and whole being. But people, I think, especially again in the modern West now, with this anti-hierarchical structure, like there is, like, tear down all hierarchies because they're just seen as corrupt or like a power. Like when you say this, people will think, when you say Mahayana is above Hinayana, people will think that, oh yeah, but it's because he's practicing Mahayana and he's like,
right.
Thinks like it's better, it's morally better, and like it's better in every way. But it's not that. It's just it transcends and includes, just like any holistic model. You have levels that transcend but also include each other. So it's the same when we, like, you see this in kids when they grow up. They go from like identifying like going through these various perspectives, shifts in developmental, like consciousness, developmental consciousness, and it always it transcends it. There's some new perspective opens up, but it still includes this former perspective. And I think that's the way to understand this hierarchical structure, which is, it's there. It's not, for me, it's not a debate either. And it's silly to have to be dragged down to the level of, no, everything is the same and everything is works equally well, because it doesn't. And it's just a truth.
Yeah.
I think that wraps it up very nicely. To bring it back, how can a beginner or an advanced practitioner of Dharma really apply that, what we have talked about here, apply bodhicitta? I think we've went through all the essential points of that. First of all, make it your own, in a sense. Don't just read about it, but reflect on it. Think about it. You don't have to make huge meditations, but think about it. Think about compassion and what it means to you. And then you get to yourself. And then realize your suffering. Realize that. And then the compassion towards yourself, that you're suffering and that you want to relieve that suffering, will bring you on the path to do something against it, to practice, to meditate, to practice what we have been talked about. And then through that certainty, that experience, these awakenings that you go through when you do that genuinely, this will unravel the mystery of bodhicitta that we hope to clarify a little bit on a conversational level here. And with that, the whole thing starts to kind of be happening on its own. You begin to really understand what the masters were talking about and all the Buddhas, because you feel it. You sense the unity of emptiness and compassion, fullness and emptiness. And then you realize absolute bodhicitta. And the Dharma is not a mystery. And the full experience of it reveals itself.
Yeah.
And this is exactly why bodhicitta is what is the most crucial in this aspect, that with proper cultivation of bodhicitta, there is no way to get stuck. Like it will drive it forward because it's no longer about you. So it's not enough to become happy than to become comfortable. And that's one of the major pitfalls, the way I see it, is that, okay, so I've relieved enough suffering now that I can live my life comfortably, but bodhicitta drives it forward because it's not about you then. And then you cannot settle for a partial recognition.
Yeah. Bodhicitta keeps making your life miserable.
Yeah, it does.
And that's a good thing. That's the selling point.
You don't have enough suffering of your own, take on everything. Take on all the suffering.
Yeah. Thank you for this chat, gents.
You.
And in case somebody is listening or watching this, thank you.